Hello again. Here we are back with James and the Giant Peach. Let's do a little recap on what we've read so far. Okay, we start off meeting a little boy, James Henry Trotter, little guy, right? And had such a happy life. He had everything that a little boy would want. He had loving parents. They lived by the beach. He had lots of friends. Just life was going so well. And then in a moment, everything changed. His parents, as you know, got eaten up by a rhinoceros. I don't even know if anybody can get eaten up by a rhinoceros, but apparently in this book it can happen. Remember, this is a fantasy genre, so anything could happen. And he was sent to live with his two just terrible aunts. These people were they're just evil, awful, awful people, Aunt Sponge and Aunt Spiker. And they live on the top of a very high hill in this just ugly, in this ugly little house. And James, and they're abusive, and it's terrible, and your heart breaks for this little boy. And he spends a few years there until he meets this strange character out in the garden one night. And this guy is this kind of bearded, we don't know anything about him. We don't know his name or anything like that. But this guy's got this bag of stuff that he gives to James, and they look like almost like little worms, glowing kind of worms, or maybe I almost picture like little grains of rice that are just moving, right? And he gives James a warning that he wants James to consume this thing and put it in water, and like wonderful things are going to happen if you drink this all in one gulp. But make sure you don't let anything else around these little whatever they are. Or all the magic that's going to happen for you is going to go to whatever it is. Maybe it could be a tree. It could be, some kind of like garden insect or whatever, things that you might find anywhere. That magic will go to them and not to you as it was intended. And of course, what happens? James trips, falls. All the contents of the bag goes all over the ground, and it goes deep into the ground before he can even get one of them. And in the meantime, Aunt Sponge and Aunt Spiker are being as nasty as they always were and threatening mean things. And, things were looking really bad for James. And all of a sudden they noticed that up in they got this peach tree, fruit trees, they don't bear fruit all the time. They have a season where they're productive, and after a while they just become fruitless. They don't and never will produce really anything, and the tree will end up dying. Well, this tree was probably pretty close to death, and it hadn't produced fruit in just years and years and years. And all of a sudden they look up, and there's a peach. There's a peach on the very top, or it didn't even blossom, but there's a peach on the top of this tree. And they're also realizing this peach is getting bigger and bigger and bigger all by itself, like right before their eyes. So that's where we left off. That was at the end of chapter 6. We're going to be on chapter 7. Did I leave out any pictures? I don't think so. Oh, yeah. I don't think I showed you this picture. This was chapter 6. This was Aunt Sponge and Aunt Spiker showing James a picture of the peach. So that's kind of where we left off. Chapter 7. We're going to go 7, 8, and 9 today. The two women and the small boy stood absolutely still on the grass underneath the tree, gazing up at the extraordinary fruit. James's little face was glowing with excitement, and his eyes were big and bright as two stars. He could see the peach swelling larger and larger, and as clearly as a balloon being blown up. In a half a minute, it was the size of a melon. In another half a minute, it was twice as big again. "Just look at it growing," Aunt Spiker cried. "Will it ever stop?" Aunt Sponge shouted, waving her fat arms and starting to distance. "Will it ever stop?" Sorry. "Will it ever stop?" Aunt Sponge shouted, waving her fat arms and starting to dance around in circles. And now it was so big it looked like an enormous butter-colored pumpkin dangling from the top of the tree. Yeah, I actually get hungry when I start reading about this peach. My stomach starts growling. "Get away from the tree trunk, you stupid boy," Aunt Spiker yelled. "The slightest shake and I'm sure it'll fall off." They must weigh 20 or 30 pounds at least. The branch on the tree was groaning upon that it was growing upon was beginning to bend over further and further until because of the weight. "Stand back," Aunt Sponge shouted. "It's coming down. The branch is going to break." But the branch didn't break. It simply bent over more and more as the peach got heavier and heavier, and still it went on growing. In another minute, this mammoth fruit was as large and round and fat as Aunt Sponge herself, and probably just as heavy. "It has to stop now," Aunt Spiker yelled. "It can't grow forever." But it didn't stop. Soon it was the size of a small car, and it reached halfway to the ground. Both ants were now hopping around and around in the tree, clapping their hands and shouting all sorts of silly things in their excitement. "Hallelujah!" Aunt Spiker shouted. "What a peach! What a peach! Terrifico!" Aunt Spiker cried out. "Magnifico! Splendifico! What a meal! And it's still growing. I know, I know." And as for James, he was so spellbound by the whole thing that he could just only stand and stare and murmur quietly to himself, "Oh, isn't it beautiful? It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." "Shut up, you little twerp," Aunt Spiker snapped, happening to overhear him. "It's none of your business." "That's right," Aunt Sponge declared. It has nothing to do with you whatsoever, so keep out of it." "Look," Aunt Spiker shouted. "It's growing faster than ever now. It's speeding up. I see it, Spiker. I do. Bigger and bigger grew the peach, bigger and bigger and bigger. Then at last, when it had been nearly as tall as the tree that it was growing on, as tall and wide, in fact, as a small house, the bottom part of it gently touched the ground, and there it rested. It's a cool picture of it. Pretty big. "It can't fall off now," Aunt Sponge shouted. "It stopped growing," Aunt Spiker cried. "No, it hasn't." "Yes, it has. It's slowing down, Spiker. It's slowing down, but it hasn't stopped yet. You watch it." There was a pause. "It has now. I believe you're right. Do you think it's safe to touch it?" "I don't know. We better be careful." Aunt Sponge and Aunt Spiker began walking slowly around the peach, inspecting it very cautiously from all sides. They were like a couple of hunters who had just shot an elephant and were not quite sure what to do, whether it was dead or alive. And the massive round fruit towered over them so high that they looked like midgets from another world behind it. The skin of the peach was very beautiful, a rich, buttery yellow with patches of brilliant pink and red. Aunt Sponge advanced cautiously and touched it with the tip of her one finger. "It's ripe," she cried. "It's just perfect. Now, here, Spiker, why don't we just get us a shovel right away and dig out a great hunk of it for you and me to eat?" "No," Aunt Spiker said, "not yet." "Why ever not?" "Because I say so." But I can't wait to eat some," Aunt Sponge cried out. She was watering at her mouth now, and a thin trickle of spit was running down the side of her chin. That's gross. "My dear Sponge," Aunt Spiker said slowly, winking at her sister and then smiling a sly, thin-lipped smile. "There's a pile of money to be made out of this if we can only handle it right. You wait and see." And that was chapter 7. It's chapter 8. Any ideas how they're going to make money? I mean, if you had a giant peach growing in your backyard, okay, and it was like nobody's ever seen anything like this before, what would you do? Is there a way to make money on this? Probably. So think about that. Chapter 8, here we go. The news that a peach almost as big as a house had suddenly appeared in someone's garden spread like wildfire across the countryside, and the next day a stream of people came scrambling up the steep hill to gaze upon this marvel. Quickly, Aunt Sponge and Aunt Spiker called the carpenters and had them build a strong fence around the peach and to save it from the crowd. And at the same time, these two crafty women stationed themselves at the front gate with a large bunch of tickets and started charging everyone for coming in. "Roll up, Roll up, Aunt Spiker yelled. Only 1 shilling to see the giant peach, half price for children under 6 weeks old, Aunt Sponge shouted. 1 at a time, please. Don't push, don't push. You're all going to get in. Hey, you, come back here. You haven't paid. By lunchtime, the whole place was a seething mess of men, women, children, all pushing and shoving to get a glimpse at the miraculous fruit. There's a picture of the chaos and pandemonium that's going around there, and Aunt Sponge and Aunt Spiker are taking full advantage of that, making some money. Helicopters were landing like wasps all over the hill, and out of them poured swarms of newspapers, reporters, cameramen, and men from television companies. It'll cost you double to bring in the camera, Aunt Spiker shouted. All right, they answered. We don't care. All the money, and the money came rolling into the pockets of the 2 greedy ants. But while all this excitement was going on outside, poor James was forced to stay locked in his bedroom, peeping through the bars of his window at the crowds below. The disgusting little brute will only get in everyone's way if we let him wander about, Aunt Spiker had said early in that morning. Oh, please, he had begged. I haven't met any other children for years and years, and there are going to be lots of them for me to play with, and perhaps I could help with the tickets. Cut it out, Aunt Sponge had snapped. Your Aunt Spiker and I are about to become millionaires, and the last thing we want is the likes of you messing things up and getting in the way. Later, when the evening of the first day came and the people had all gone home, the ants unlocked James's door and ordered him to go outside and pick up the banana skins and the orange peels and the bits of paper and that the crowd had left behind. Could I please have something to eat first? He asked. I haven't had a thing all day. No, they shouted, kicking him out the door. We're too busy to make food. We are counting our money. But it's dark, cried James. Get out, they yelled, and stay out until you've cleaned up all the mess. The door slammed and the key turned in the lock. Chapter 9. This is our last chapter for today. Hungry and trembling, James stood alone out in the open, wondering what to do. The night was all around him now, and high overhead, a wild white moon was rising in the sky. There was not a sound, not a movement anywhere. Most people, and especially small children, are often quite scared of being out of doors in the moonlight. Everything is so deadly quiet, and the shadows are so long and black, and they keep turning into strange shapes that seem to move if you look at them, and the slightest little snap of a twig makes you jump. James felt exactly like that now. He stared straight ahead with large, frightened eyes, hardly daring to breathe. Not far away in the middle of the garden, he could see a giant peach towering over everything else. Surely it was even bigger tonight than it was before. And what a dazzling sight it was. The moonlight was shining and glinting on its great curving sides, turning them crystal and silver. It looked like a tremendous silver ball lying there in the grass, silent, mysterious, and wonderful. And then all at once, little shivers of excitement started running all over the skin of James's back. Something else, he told himself. Something stranger than ever this time is about to happen to me again soon. He was sure of it. He could feel it coming. He looked around him, wondering what on earth it was going to be. The garden lay soft and silver in the moonlight. The grass was wet with dew, and 1,000,000 dewdrops were sparkling and twinkling like diamonds at his feet. And now, suddenly, the whole place, the whole garden, seemed alive with magic. Almost without knowing what he was doing, as though drawn by some powerful magnet, James Henry Trotter started walking slowly towards the giant peach. He climbed over the fence that surrounded it and stood directly beneath it, staring up at it at its great bulging sides. He put out his hand and touched it gently with the tip of his finger. He felt the soft, warm, slightly furry, like the skin of a baby mouse. He moved a step closer and rubbed his cheek slightly against the soft skin. And then suddenly, while he was doing this, he happened to notice that right beside him, below him, close to the ground, there was a hole in the side of the peach. Okay, look at that picture. Now, the last couple of paragraphs, especially the one before that we just finished, I reread that. Well, you can't reread it because you don't have your book, but maybe I'll reread it. And as I reread this, pay attention to how Roald Dahl uses just some great imagery in this, because it's just this beautiful scene in the garden, and it's this one of the few maybe peaceful, wonderful times in James's life right now. I'm just going to read that one paragraph again. He looked around him, wondering what on earth it was going to be. The garden lay soft and silver in the moonlight. Grass was wet with dew, like a million dewdrops were sparkling and twinkling like diamonds around his feet. And now suddenly, the whole place, the whole garden, seemed to be alive with magic. And you see some things that he's using here, the author's using. He uses some similes, a couple of them, I think, and using like some metaphors to really help us picture this scene, which is really kind of a neat scene. Well, he finds a hole at the bottom of the peach, so it's going to be interesting to see what happens next. So tomorrow we're going to read 10, 11, and 12, and this is where things really start looking up for James, and it starts getting pretty exciting. So this is a great time. All right, I hope you're doing well, and hope to see you eventually soon. Again, miss you guys. Take care, and talk to you later. Bye.